Welcome everyone. Welcome to our 9th Life After Lockdown event. And today we're going to be talking about kindness after lockdown. This series aims to visualise what life after lockdown will look like. And today we're looking at how lockdown has benefited the community for good and what kind acts we have seen come out of this historic event. We also want to look at how we can maintain this momentum and sort of collectively commit to a kinder, more caring society. So my name's Verity Firth. I'm the Executive Director of Social Justice here at UTS, and I run our Centre for Social Justice and Inclusion. And joining me today, we have a really fantastic panel. We have Helen Sylvia, who's the CEO of the Women and Girls Emergency Centre. We have Alex Connor, who's the Volunteering and Training Coordinator here at the UTS Centre for Social Justice and Inclusion. And we have Michelle Gomes, Joy Akinpei and Maureen Lee, the ladies behind the Newtown Blessing Box. But before we begin, I'd obviously like to acknowledge that I'm meeting today on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. These are also the ancestral lands upon which our UTS City campus stands. So we always like to pay respect to elders past and present, extend that respect to other Aboriginal people joining with us today, and also acknowledge the Gadigal as the traditional custodians of knowledge for the land on which the university sits. So you can see, hopefully you can see our panel on the screen. And of course, please bear with us if we do have any technical problems. But you can also send through your own questions. And so if you're looking at your screen now, you'll see that there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. And we will have some time at the end to put questions to the panel. So please, if a question comes up while you're listening, just log on and ask it. So let's begin. So I think we'll start with the Newtown Blessing Box, our famous people here today who've done some incredible work during this time. We're really lucky to have all three founders from the Newtown Blessing Box here with us today, Michelle, Joy and Maureen. So to begin with, can you firstly just tell us a little bit about what the Blessing Box is? And can you also tell us a bit about how it came about and what need did you see in the community that made you go down this journey of creating a blessing box?
So essentially the blessing box is a shared community pantry. So our slogan has always been take what you need and leave what you can. And it is as simple as that. I think for us, what motivated us was the need we saw in the community. Initially, this was, we were thinking of asylum seekers. That's what prompted us to set up the Newtown Blessing Box. We quickly saw, and I mean within a couple of days, that actually the need was far greater. And if anything, asylum seekers are being served so spectacularly by the Asylum Seeker Centre, like incredible. And that who we actually were serving were the fellow people in our communities, and especially people that have never ever had to rely on government benefits or any charity. So it's quite wide ranging. It was people that have lost their jobs due to COVID, people that both live paycheck to paycheck, and others that after they pay for their mortgage and rent, there's little left over. We also saw other types of needs. Like we really learnt about how pensioners that live in our area of the high rents, actually they've got this need all the time. And one beautiful thing we saw, a need that shifted was when they housed all the Newtown rough sleepers, that suddenly they were all coming past clean and sharp and happy and taking things like pasta because it's the first time they were able to cook a meal in a long time. So it was quite fascinating for us. We were like this little epicenter of the community and so many amazing interactions and humble learnings.
So tell me what exactly is the Blessing Box? It's a collective. Tell us how you got on and claimed, was it a cupboard in the street to create the Blessing Box? And then how does it work? How does the Blessing Box work?
It's a community pantry. So it is a cupboard. We found it in Camperdown and we called it Camperdown Cupboard. It decided to rename itself Newtown Blessing Box, and we put crates in there. Michelle's dad helped put a light in there, and we said, this is the vision, it's to have shelves, and it became a pantry, but really it's a cupboard. And the concept was we actually created, it was to give to the community. It was like whatever we have in our cup, being very naive. We're like, let's put 2 cans in there from our own cupboards. Like, we're going through COVID. We're affected. We were all affected. We're from the events and arts industry. We watched this income go down. So we were like, let's do something we can do, we have control over. So I guess what it is, it's, if you need a can, take a can. If you can put one in, put one in. It was really that simple. Yeah, that's the basis of it, I guess, of what it is. But it is definitely more than just food, what we've learned. Our naive idea, Joyce said, let's put Post-it notes in there. And then we put Post-it notes. The Post-it notes grew from 1 to 50 in 10 days.
Yeah.
People saw, what we really realized was, we were also facilitating a need for connection. That we as in a society where we're just, productivity is key, get stuff done. What are you learning? Especially we're from UTS, we're also in UTS Startups, like, what's the outcome, meet the deadline. And that shifted. It was like conversations that, are you okay? How can I help? What can I do? Full stop. And really staying there and listening. Yeah. I think that facilitating that more than just the food. The community was craving connection and empathy, and the Blessing Box was a house for that too.
What I love about the Blessing Box is it's a, there's something very almost old-fashioned about it. Like, it's a physical presence on the streetscape. People bring stuff to it, and I love that idea of the reciprocal nature of it. They give and take, and according to need. So it's really beautiful. But of course, there's also a technology side that enabled it to grow as well, isn't there? Like, you had the physical presence, but you also had an online presence. And this idea that technology can often be alienating, it's almost the opposite of that, because the online presence, the Facebook, actually enabled the concept to grow and to multiply and to be created in other spaces. So talk a little bit about how you used, I suppose, the online or social media to scale the idea.
Absolutely, it was pivotal. Yes, we were feeling the effects of unconscious social media, the negative effects of being unconscious, being disconnected, being saturated with information, but your heart is like, I'm craving connection. We took that knowing and we flipped it to create stories. The thing that made a difference in how we use technology was we used this platform as a storytelling platform. We actually learned this from Jo Wallace from Humans of Newtown. She interviewed us, and the way she interviewed and her storytelling was gorgeous. So we take that same beautiful learning, and each and every person we met, because we were slowing down in jobs, we had time. We had time to chat to people. We were out there for 6 hours a day because we craved the connection as well. So we were chatting to Betty, who was a pensioner who could afford a 89-cent biscuit once a week to give to the Blessing Box. She goes, I know that when you don't have enough money, that biscuit just does something to you. And then knowing those stories and then posting about Betty, and then we met Penny Sharp. We didn't know who she was. I'm like, oh my God, this woman we know of. She was literally someone that we knew of was donating to us. And then later on, she connected us to her charities. And when they have overflow, the Blessing Box became a weekly destination. So we got tapped into her network. Jenny Leong came along when Channel 9 went gangbusters. Like, Channel 9 gave us a platform to reach, we call them Eastern Suburb ladies. The high income network, they came in, they had time, they had money, they had resources, they had the cars, they were already connected to their non-for-profits, and then they started coming to us. We had massive deliveries, beautiful, gorgeous women, part of Share the Dignity. Some charities stopped along the way, and those women still like, we need to do something. There's a need. There's this beautiful, empathetic part of them. Their husbands are in the car with them. They were working from home. The whole family came in the car. And we posted stories of these beautiful families, and that was the difference. The community, the stereotype stopped. The drilling down stopped. And what we found was these people, they care. Like, at the end of the day, everyone cares. From one little jar of peanut butter to like 60 crates of groceries, each and every person cares. I think that was the breadth of the difference of how we use the power of social media. And in regards to like how this would help other movements, we would advise to do it the same way. We never expected the PR to come along. Regardless, we were doing it from love. But it's literally whatever you're connecting to, whoever you're helping, whatever. If you do need donors, or whoever you're engaging with as a business or a movement, as a non-for-profit, storytelling, like telling those personable stories. We also had, we sort of put our personality and our authentic stamp on it. We truly believe in a thread of having a healthy mind no matter what. So our posts have threads of those elements in there. Abundant mindset. We would post an empty blessing box and said, we would literally say, we believe that the community will fill this. And then the next hour it gets filled, we take that photo and it's replicated every single time. We're expressing our beliefs through that. So that was another layer of we got to do without needing to ask someone, hey, it's okay, we say this about a brand. We were just our own brand ambassadors, if that makes sense. So that was an extra level of why it worked.
Yeah. And as the restrictions are easing, what are you discovering? I mean, we know that people still need help and will actually continue to need help for a long time as the economy rebuilds. So how do you think, or what have you been thinking about how to keep the momentum going? And what are your thoughts around that? How do we continue to, I suppose, remind people of this enormously positive experience they've had and encourage them to keep doing it?
Yeah, we are aware about our limitations as well. Like, we start from a little cabin and helping people, and all the neighbors start to know about us, but we know that we cannot reach to everyone. So we try also with the social media, with our communication, to start a movement and engage people to start their own blessing box in their neighborhood. We have already we got in contact with people with around 5 blessing box that was set up, like in Darlinghurst or Petersham and other areas. And we understand that this is a concept that needs to be carried on in order to be sustainable. So the idea is, maybe it would be amazing if every neighborhood or other places could have a blessing box. And also it's another channel where people can get in contact with their neighbors or with their community. I had the opportunity to meet people around Newtown that I would have the opportunity if it wasn't for that. So people can literally share experience and know what's going on and know people for real. And we do believe, like, with the movement, people could have the opportunities like that.
I love that idea. So I'm just going to move on to Helen now, and we'll come back to you, Blessing Box. So hold your thoughts. Helen, I want to talk to you because the Women and Girls Emergency Centre in some ways is a very traditional model of providing support to those in need. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you found your service pivoted during lockdown, and how you found the way you were working started to change during lockdown.
Yeah, interesting. Very quickly, we found the need to have to pivot incredibly quickly, sort of within a week, really. I mean, we were, I guess to give a bit of context too, so Women's and Girls Emergency Centre, we refer to ourselves as WAGEC, and many people know us as WAGEC, so it's less of a mouthful, I'll just use that. We accommodate about 200 women and children across Sydney each night, and we have our central support office in Redfern, which isn't a drop-in centre, but we've been getting about 160 odd women come through that as drop-ins each month, so it's been increasing in terms of the person-to-person contact. So we provide crisis and medium-term accommodation, a range of support services and other programs to single women and women with children, predominantly escaping domestic and family violence, or just experiencing homelessness and other forms of social disadvantage, and a really, really diverse mix of women that come from all over. Lots of women from where English, they either don't have English or English as a second language, which had became quite challenging when we did have to pivot to move to sort of more online services. So within about a week, we really needed to put in quite stringent infection controls and spatial distancing, and actually move our whole workforce to be doing differentiated rosters. We're an essential service. We can't be closing down any of our 24/7 services, but we can't be doing face-to-face contact, but we can't not be doing face-to-face contact. So it was a really challenging time, but I think it just showed the resilience of the workforce for a start, because everyone adapted really quickly. The community mobilised really quickly in terms of their support, and the women who we were responding and supporting and working with required additional types of support in terms of just managing the mental health, anxiety, additional levels of stress, particularly when you're supporting women who are going through intensely stressful periods of their life. And we know what sort of chronic stress can do to sort of someone's immunity and their sort of sense of being. So actually health and well-being was a massive part of our crisis management response for COVID. And it was sort of equally as much as it was trying to make sure we had enough PPE and enough food and stock in our cupboards. Like we had toilet paper issues and we'd been stockpiling before because we've got, a lot of women and children to make sure we've got provisions for. Yeah, so within a week, we just launched this great new mentoring program that we had put a lot of time and effort into, and that was about to have a big formal launch, and it was all going to be in person. Done. They had to go online. We had our major fundraising event for the year, which was a walk in person across Sydney. That had to get scrapped. So a lot of what we knew and had been planning and putting resources towards, both in terms of our direct service provision, as well as the work we do in community and our fundraising efforts, just had to get a complete rewrite really quickly, along with the rest of the country and world, to be honest. But it was challenging. But in those challenging moments, I think there's always great learning and great opportunities to try things different and to connect with people different. And we found that as well in spades.
And when you were talking then, you actually talked about it was firstly how you pivoted as a service provider, but you also talked about how the community engaged with you really generously and in a sort of new and different way. And I want to talk about that. So how did the community or your outside supporters start to engage with you?
Yeah, great. Look, we love working with community because we see that we're all in this together. So regardless of whether we're receiving service, we're giving service support, or having those kinds of really important conversations and dialogue around issues that matter and issues that impact us all, we just sort of see working with community is what we do. Like that's a core part of who we are fundamentally. When we stopped Walk for WAGEC, one of our reasons to do that early on before the kind of lockdown happened was we were just faced with so many of our supporters. They were losing their jobs. They were finding really hard economic times. They were dealing with stress and anxiety in their own households and families. And we just didn't want to be putting any more burden on people when they weren't necessarily in a position to support. But what we found was that there were so many people that came forward to say, look, we're okay, and we want to find out how we can support others whilst not letting those who were really dealing with their own difficult situations feel a sense of needing to give when they actually just need to nurture themselves. And in doing that, so a couple of examples of that was Hannah Skrinsky and Bondi Bubs talk about sort of, you know, some of the eastern suburbs communities, and she and her just group of mums formed this Mums Giving Grocery Circle, raised a crapload of money to buy fresh groceries, cook beautiful food and deliver it to the refugees, which was amazing because it was at a time when so many of our women actually received no government support because they're on precarious visas, they have no income, they rely on us for everything. And when there were like various kinds of shortages, and, you know, it was just perfect timing, and it was helpful. So there were lots of things like that. Little Care Packs did this online disco, and so it was raising funds, which wasn't, you know, that was fantastic and really helpful, but it was around kind of engaging kids of anyone in the community. So last day of the school holidays, school's gone at home, you know, everything in Sydney is just crazy, everywhere's crazy, and there's like 109 families all dialed into this online disco, and the kids are just going nuts in the lounge room, and people are dressed up and they're there with their families, and, you know, whichever family, chosen family or otherwise, having a ball. There's a DJ there, moments like that, and you go, that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for COVID. So yeah, some pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah, I love that. It's this thing about all of the people suddenly felt, I want to help, and I'm just going to do it, like a flowering of help. And I agree with you. It was really quite unique and wonderful. And asking you the similar question to ask Blessing Box, which is, okay, then now what? How do we maintain that momentum? And I particularly wanted to talk to you about what the greatest areas of need were for women and girls in the next 12 to 18 months. So a sense of what is the need and how do we maintain this momentum?
Yeah, look, another great question, Verity. Because it's interesting, like there was lots of need during COVID, but I think in the area that we work, we're actually going to be seeing that next 12 to 18 months as increasing demand for services. You know, we know what the economists are telling us in terms of job loss and recession and that kind of economic hardship. We also know really like will impact across community, but particularly for those sort of most vulnerable already. So already we're seeing increases in women who have lost their jobs, who are on casual work and no longer have it. Again, we support a lot of women who are on precarious visas that actually don't have any means of access to any universal services or income support. Increasing, we're starting to see increases around that, and increases of women that traditionally we may not have been supporting. As lockdown measures subside, we're starting to see women who weren't able to receive support where they're living in abusive and violent households because the user of violence is living in that household with them. So being able to, for us, really kind of monitoring those emerging trends and issues and being like keeping that really close ear to the ground around what the need is so that we can respond and can respond appropriately, working with and continuing to communicate with our community and our supporters. And for us, that's really important. So, you know, we've got a community Facebook group, We're the Women, and we're relatively active on Instagram and Facebook, and that's really important as well, because whether people are supporters or just part of that community, that forms part of understanding what those needs are and keeping people engaged. So I think continuing to have those really important community conversations and keeping that dialogue around open and keeping that community awareness at the forefront, not just that, you know, that was yesterday's issue or that was yesterday's news, because these are things that are structurally we need to be examining and working on how we actually make a difference in the longevity. So I think continuing to just work with our community and supporters, continuing to understand what the needs are on the ground for those that need support, and, you know, just one foot in front of the other. I may have got lost somewhere in that response.
No, but that's exactly right, you know, and I suppose it's also just reminding people how successful it was when we all did pitch in, you know, what I mean? Keeping that at the forefront of people's minds.
It's like Blessing Box said, like just one, you know, just a can of beans or a packet of pasta. Like it doesn't matter how big or small that contribution is, right?
Yeah, that's right. One drop in the ocean, but each drop may cause a tide. Alex, I'm going to come to you now because you've had extensive experience with organising volunteers. And I know that you've got some interesting views about both the problems and the opportunities the last few months has highlighted.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting time because I think when we talk about volunteering, particularly from my perspective, there's this idea of formal volunteering that takes place in an organisation and informal volunteering where the community kind of comes together. And according to Volunteering Australia, like, it's volunteering's time willingly given for the common good without financial gain. That's it. Doesn't say it has to happen in a charity, doesn't say it has to happen in an organisation. It's just you want to do something for someone else, and that's pretty much all it is. What's interesting that's happened with COVID is that a lot of the formal volunteering sectors, they've lost all their volunteers over 70 because they've been told to stay home because they're high risk. They've also got a lot of responsibilities as a charity and organisation providing something that is essential to make sure that they can keep running. So organisations have either pivoted to online really, really fast, or shut down because they feel such a huge responsibility personally and legally to make sure that their staff and volunteers are always safe. And what's happening now is that it's interesting that in Australia so far, you know, we haven't been hit by COVID in the same way other countries have. So they're kind of opening back up, but there's a nervousness to restart the volunteer programs and get everyone back on the ground because they don't want to risk people's health. But those needs are still essential. So it's kind of a strange kind of mix of things. And I think there's some questions about a regulatory environment and how we can be more enabling. What I really love about the Blessing Box, for example, is that they identified a need and just kind of went for it, and everyone got behind them. And I think a lot of that's happened a lot all throughout the country. And I think it's shown people in the community, but also those organizations and structures, that there's a space for this to be an ecosystem where it all works in together, and there's a space to enable that informal volunteering and do some really awesome stuff. So yeah, it's kind
So
of,
I think that's a really interesting point you make about the thing about the Blessing Box or the work that's being done with WAGEC. It was an environment where people had the confidence to step up. Like, they literally went, hey, wait a minute, I am allowed to step up and be in this space. And there was an ease, like, you know, there wasn't regulatory frameworks, there wasn't health and safety, you know, OH&S issues. So how do we strike the right balance? You know what I mean? How do we actually create situations that are enabling and allow people to give their time freely and when they want and how they want, but are also safe, obviously?
Yeah, and I think it's really tricky, and it's going to be quite cool because I know that when we were chatting to, I know I chatted to Maureen, Michelle and Joy before, they were kind of talking about sometimes people were just looking for that conduit. And I wonder how much everyone walked around every day going, these are real problems and I want to help, but I don't know how. And what happened is that through, and I think I see it in the context of Australian bushfire leading into COVID, and now also the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of people are seeing these things, and all these structural social issues that were always there are bubbling to the surface. And more people are just communicating with each other and saying, what did you do? Oh, what can you do? Oh, this person's doing this. Can I hop on that? And so there's this real collaborative thing that's happening at the moment. And so I think that's part of it, not being afraid to be the one drop in the ocean and start your thing and see who joins you. So there was a great example during the bushfires in my local area. A gentleman in Woolloomooloo had a friend who worked at Wires and spoke to someone else through a business contact and got a load of timber delivered to his garage, and just went out to the community on Facebook and said, come build some nesting boxes at my place. And Wires was able to give him that just enough structure to take them on as volunteers to make sure that everyone was covered. He thought through how to make it safe and brought these people together. And everyone who came to that day was just so grateful that someone had taken that step to do that thing. And I think that's what this time has given us, this opportunity is to give ourselves permission to take that step and then collaborate. So if you do want to keep things going or start something yourself, you know, connect with your local council, connect with your local Facebook groups, be open and collaborative, and make it about what change you want to see, not necessarily the thing that you want to give. So that way you can connect in with other people, and you know, your local community centre is going to say, this is amazing, did you know we already had this program going? City of Sydney's actually got a grant for people who are doing this. There's a group in Ultimo who've decided to start their own solar panel kind of like their own grid in their own department to try and make their own area more sustainable. And it's just because they kind of connected about something else, and now they've started doing that. So you don't know where these things are going to go. And the other benefit of it is the stats around volunteering. You know, we were all feeling quite tense and like, what can I do, and very stressed. And there's some studies I think that ANU is going to be publishing soon around people who volunteered before COVID and were able to maintain their volunteering, reported higher levels of happiness, better sleep, better connection. And people who started for the first time also experience those same benefits. So there's a real community connection piece that, you know, the guys were talking about with the post-it notes, and even you getting the opportunity to go out and be there for a few hours and meet Betty with the biscuits and all those awesome things. That's a big part of the story as well. And I think it connects to what makes us human, really, and what we want to do in these times.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And do you think, you were talking about how some of the traditional charities got a bit nervous when COVID began about the sort of additional people coming along seeking to volunteer. Do you think that there is reflection in those more traditional charity structures going on at the moment about harnessing this?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of them have recognized that they want to get more young people involved. And so they've had to create, you know, the needs of a retiree volunteer and the needs of a university student volunteer are going to be very different. And I'm sure that, you know, Helen experiences this at YJAC with all the people, different types of people coming through, that you might need to create some different programs and structures. And they're all absolutely so aware of it. And I think that nervousness really just came from wanting to provide the best volunteer experience and make sure everyone's safe. And, you know, that's fabulous, but they're definitely considering it. And I think over the next 3 to 6 months, you'll start seeing some more new and innovative and creative programs coming up. The New South Wales Centre for Volunteering has actually launched a new website just called emergencyvolunteering.com.au, and they're partnering with local councils, and you can go in and register. And so they're trying to help bring all these communities together and have a database so that then you've got that link to allow all these things to happen. So you'll start seeing a lot more of that stuff, I think.
That's great. And that's a really good role government can play, actually, is be that sort of connector, provide the platform that people can connect to each other. It's actually a good role they can play.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question from the audience now. So they're beginning to come up. So I've been having them fed into my chat. So I might now open it up. There is a question here for Blessing Box, which is sort of related to what we were just talking about in terms of that balance between regulation and allowing, 1,000 flowers to bloom. Blessing Box, did you experience any issues or need any permissions from the council in order to do what you did?
We didn't ask for permission.
You asked for forgiveness.
we sort of got the blessings when police just drive past, and Jenny Leong's on Channel 9 in front of it. We thought, okay, thumbs up. That's probably where it's at. So that's, Is that the question?
That's the question. So you didn't really get permission, but you just did it anyway, and then the momentum meant that everyone went, oh, that's all right, off you go.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
What Alex brought up, something really interesting was every single person that inquired about setting one up, their first question literally, they literally wrote to us and said, we love this concept, we want to do it, did you get council permission? And what we learned, we were like, wow, like this is a real, we totally understand, but it's a real inhibitor. And we obviously had to say the truth and say, no, we didn't. And what we grappled with here is, this ties in for us with, bystander effect almost, where we feel disempowered, so we do nothing instead. And we loved that when we did this, we actually made it, and initially there were people that came by and were like, ooh, it was very uncomfortable for some people. How are you doing this? What if it falls on someone? And so much. And for us, it was very simple and empathetic. We're like, how do we not do this? How do we know that our neighbours are not eating and we don't, how do we not? So I think that's oversimplification. I also think this is a very special COVID. COVID gave us an opportunity where it was a heightened sense of emotion, a heightened sense of being kind of like the original rule book was out for those weeks, and we just really felt compelled.
I also think on top of that, we did get a lot of people tell us things, how to run a blessing box. And we just smiled and then brought them back to, like Michelle said, brought them back to the point. Thank you for, I think the output was not helpful, but the intent was, this is me trying to help you. So then we'll redirect and receive the intent, but then we will go, love you, that you care, this is how you can help. Join our Facebook group. Hey, you might not need to take something from the blessing box right now. We've got 50 loaves of bread. Take 3 and check on your neighbour.
Yeah.
That's how we refacilitated the conversation and redirected what our vision would be and what's really important, the dialogue that's really important.
We learned during the process as well how to respond to these inquiries. We were not really sure exactly how to be not cordial, nice to these people at the same time and respond in the most effective way. So, yeah.
That is true. That's a real skill. It's interesting because this is also a learning opportunity for local government and for government, right? So the advantages of government or local government is it can deliver services at scale and it can do things in a very big way and a sustainable way. But government often isn't as good at the actual connection stuff, you know, the actual person-to-person sort of sense of belonging stuff. And so this is actually an opportunity for government to learn as well, and an opportunity for local governments to start thinking about their bylaws and how they can encourage this sort of activity. And I think you'll find, hopefully, my positive things is I hope actually local governments start to deal with this as well to make it less bureaucratic. Alex and Helen, is there anything you want to add to that point, just about sort of, I suppose, the tensions of bureaucracy versus the flowering?
I think that, yeah, because it is a real tension when you look at volunteers, for example, or setting up something when you're in a structure that you actually have legal and other kind of regulatory compliance and guidelines that need to be followed, and you know there are risk and liability issues, and there's so much to, but that is the beauty of really kind of grassroots initiatives and movements such as the Blessing Box, and it's where there's such a space for everything, because you know, community is built on like neighbours helping each other and people having a yarn in the street, and the Blessing Box is such a modern variation of that. It's so beautiful to hear as well that there's that immense community legitimacy that was surrounded that, rather than going, oh, you've got to think about, you know, what's the, but you know, install a risk framework around that initiative. So it's like we just need to be able to let the garden grow, proliferate those kinds of grassroots community movements of people engaging and helping one another. And I think that that's beautiful, and I think that there are learnings around some of the over compliance and regulation that we do face within, even just within the NFP space, and there's definitely a space for that, and that's required, but we do need to also look at, geez, where does that balance need to be struck? So, you know, a good example is that, you know, volunteers now are very much treated in the same kind of way from a duty of care in WHS as a staff member is, and that's great because it's a protection for your volunteers, and we need to have that, rather than, but you've also got to have that balance of flexibility and allowing people to just be and do helpful things. You know, we need working with children checks. I would actually encourage anybody that's at school or once you've turned 18 or you're at uni, like go and get your working with children check, because that's going to be one barrier that you've already removed when you go to volunteer at a lot of organisations. So yeah, the short answer is, I think within that tension point, I think it's around just creating space in the garden for everything, because there's a real role for activating everybody's intentions to do good, and for it to be beyond your own needs being met, but actually sort of like enriching the community that we're in. So it's pretty amazing stuff.
And Alex, did you have something you wanted to say?
I just kind of completely agree with that. So thanks, Helen. That's perfect.
Helen summed it up, did she? Perfect.
I think she did, and I think there's some interesting, there's just that interesting tension of trying to figure out how to make that work. And I think particularly in COVID, we all switched back on to connecting to our communities and leaving notes in our apartment buildings saying we'll go grocery shopping for you and stuff. And it's how do we then turn that into something longer term? And I think for a lot of us, it's going to be, I think this was a moment where we realized that, oh, wow, these structural issues are everywhere. And it took this to bring it to the surface. And then it's our decisions as individuals who want to volunteer or create something to see, okay, what are we going to keep doing to try and address the actual structural cause now that we've gotten past that immediate need? And that's when going into those bigger organizations and perhaps joining something larger might help, as well as having that community support. So it's the ecosystem of it,
Yeah, that's, Spot on. Okay, another question. We haven't heard a lot about churches during this time. What will their role be moving forward? Who wants to talk about churches? To talk about church. Alex, do you want to have a go? What do you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, like, I don't have a huge amount of experience as churches as being different from any other organisations that are trying to deliver something good in their community. I'd say for a lot of them, there's the benefit of the fact that they come with an inbuilt community of people who you can, you know, activate and get to collaborate. They usually come with a bit of a space that they can use, but they're facing the same social distancing and the other challenges that everybody else is. So I wouldn't necessarily say that churches have a different role from other organisations that are working in this space. I think they're facing the same challenges as everybody else. And, you know, they have that role to be, you know, a thought leader in their particular groups and areas. But beyond that, yeah, I think they're probably dealing with the same stuff everyone else is.
Yeah. Anyone else want to add on churches? Otherwise, I'll move on to our next question. Do you think the media does enough to encourage goodwill in society during such a crisis? If not, how can the media assist? What do you think? Who wants to have the first stab at that blessing box? Do you have any views on that?
I do. I think the media has done wonders for the blessing box, to be honest. We've had 16 interviews. Like our first one was like, okay, and then you just keep nodding. And initially it was like, oh, do we want our lives to be like this? But when you meet the people on the street, it's like, yes, everything is an outlet. Get the message out there. Absolutely. Channel 9 came in and we had a big reach from there of everyday people. It was beautiful. Articles written by Time Out, a lot of it, definitely. Something I learned about from a beautiful thing I read an article about Black Lives Matter, the media has the ability to control narrative. So, for example, instead of showing shootings, show the stories. So again, absolutely, we are showing the stories. We're not showing the statistics on our website. How many people have died? Wash your hands, none of that. You know that already. You don't need to put that on repeat. We showed stories of how else you can do, the anxiety you're feeling, how you can connect, what else can you do? So absolutely.
Yeah. Helen, I want to ask you, because domestic violence and media portrayals of domestic violence is really critical. They're getting better, I think, but there's still a long way to go, isn't there? What role do you think the media could be playing moving forward, or how could they assist better?
Yeah, look, I mean, it has a really, it is one of the many sort of important conduits to actually getting to community as well. So when you look at the area of domestic and family violence, or some of the more traditional charities that are sort of specifically dealing with specific issues, such as DV, it's an opportunity to be, I think I've got a bit of echo, sorry. It's an opportunity to help educate community as well, and to engage those open conversations and that dialogue. So things around language, not victim blaming, the way that we frame the issues and how we balance that with, if it's a good news story, how we balance that genuine good news story in humanity, but also not minimizing or trivializing actually some of those really kind of core issues, because that's an opportunity for enculturating change within our community. So if we look at, particularly in the area of domestic and family violence, we know that, you know, the biggest causal factor is gender inequality. So having every opportunity that you speak to the media, or every opportunity that you engage with the community, it's around engaging that messaging along with any other messaging that's taking place. So, you know, I think journos that actually do their research and journos that sort of inform themselves around, and this goes not just for sort of DFE, but how people report on a range of different social issues, because language is everything. And yeah, getting that tone right is also really important, because it's an opportunity to, yeah, reset the way, as it, like you said, as it Joy, about you know, that media does have an influence in setting sort of community narrative. So it's not something that should be taken lightly, and when it's done wrong, it's really damaging, and when it's done right, it's got power to have actually bigger impact than just sharing a story.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I'm going to move to another question, because I want to be able to try to ask as many as possible, and I'm going to give this to you, Alex, in the first instance. Question: we are looking to create a project for our neighbours. What are the top three tips to keeping the kindness momentum going?
Well, yeah. So I think the number one thing if you're going to create a new project is understand the need first. So make it about what they need, not necessarily exactly what you want to give. Then understand your why. Like, what is the purpose of the thing that you're doing? Is it to help your neighbours connect and therefore provide food? Is it to help them get out? Is it to help them? And like, what is it about this thing that you want to do for your neighbours that's the core of it? Because then it means that if the thing that you do to get to that changes over time, as the system changes, as the world changes, you can keep really clear on that. And I think that's something that the Blessing Box team did really, really well, that they kind of shifted and filtered, and it was about connection and enabling people to give as well as receive. And so as it grows, I think that's really important. And just how you talk to people, try to include people in your decision making as much as possible, like why you're choosing to go down this road, share those stories, keep them involved in it, rather than creating your own little group of people who make the decisions and then tell everyone what you're going to do. I think people want to be part of something, not just transactional at this time. So they'd be my top three.
That's really great. And from Maureen, Michelle and Joe, if you had to, am I muted still or am I okay? Okay, cool. So it was telling me I was muted. So if you had to give advice to people starting up their own community initiative like you have done, what would your top three tips be?
Number one, don't ask counsel. That's a joke. that is a joke. I think ties very closely in with what Alex said. Definitely around know the need, but we found that sometimes when people try and overcomplicate things by, especially in community projects, we've had this experience where you want to do surveys and you really want to understand before you do anything, and then you don't do anything at all. So we found that know the need and definitely reach out. Start really basic and let it evolve. So like we did do, like other people do, we were never wedded on we're serving a group. We were, okay, you know what, these are the 5 people and they represent these groups and that's who's coming. Let's ask them what they need. And then when we post about what we need, let's focus on that. And as it grew, it was very, very organic like that. I think that was very important. Another thing that I would say is, especially for smaller, like something small like what we're doing in a community thing, you really have to let go of expectations and your expectations about what other people need to do or what you expect others to do. You really have to go within or to that nuclear group and say, the why is so important, like Alex said. Know the why, but also know, hey, if nothing happens from here, it's okay. If we help 5 people, it's okay. If what we're prepared to do is an hour a day and 3 posts, and that's okay. And I think sometimes we overwhelm ourselves with, you know what, to do this, we need to do A, B, C, and D, and we talk ourselves out of it. And we also get disappointed in others when really it's got nothing to do with anyone else. So I think it's really important to give what you can. And we've also relayed kind of like the way that we think, we've relayed that in all our posts. And that's why it was really important to us to say, and like you also mentioned, Helen, which we did do that. It was kind of give 1 can, you make a difference. Send us $200 worth of shopping, you make a difference. The whole point is that there was community buy-in. And the community buy-in is what sustained the Blessing Box. It was not us. People were checking on it. It was never vandalized. That community buy-in was absolutely priceless. And that you can only get that when you're growing with the community. Yeah.
Do you have any tips, Helen? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Taking yourself off mute's probably finding your voice. Look, I think that community buy-in is so important. I couldn't agree more. And I guess I'm just probably repeating what's already been said, because I think that understanding the need and the why, and not putting your own and differentiating that from maybe what you're seeking to get out of it, as opposed to what the sort of greater good and cause is that you're hoping to help or to contribute to or to be a part of. And I think that Alex's point about the kind of journey in between and how you get there and what that looks like, letting that go a bit, like, yes, we need to plan, but actually having that really solid understanding of like what kind of impact are we hoping to make, and what is that why, and what is that need, and how do we engage, because those steps in between and those kind of outputs will change, and we need to be prepared to not hold on to that, because that's not the important stuff. The important stuff is the why and how we get there. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
This is going to be the final question, because we're coming up to the hour, and I know this has come from the audience, so you haven't had a chance perhaps to think about it yet, but it's a great question to end on, which is question: what are the ways to avoid slipping back into the old ways, the focus on the economy rather than the broader focus on society and community? So maybe if you can just have a little think about one way that you think we could avoid slipping back into that old style of thinking. And I'm going to start with Alex, and the others can have a little think.
Okay, buy you some thinking time. No, I think what's interesting is that, you know, when we talk about the economy, I think most of us, you know, we are all talking about it as a delivery vehicle for community well-being. Like when we talk about the economy, we are thinking about people having jobs and putting food on the table. So it's not that much of a stretch to then say, okay, when we're having these discussions, I think storytelling is sometimes quite important, and framing it as, you know, we want to make sure that our community is healthy and vibrant and people have mental health and are supported and food on the table and connection. And we're just discussing about how to do that this way, instead of necessarily doing it through, you know, a paid employment or something like that. So for me, I think it's very much about discussion and framing. And when someone does start talking about the economy, trying to bring it back to, and then. So the economy to do what, and can we do that in a different way? And can we support people in this collaborative way, which also delivers all these wonderful mental health benefits and things.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
how we talk
What
about
what do you reckon, Blessing Box people?
We were actually just sorry, Alex, we had a little chat then about there's so many ways to look at this. I think where we land and what we believe is that we need to change our mindset. So actually, the problem is that we separate the two, when the truth is, and we already know this, that society and community initiatives make the economy stronger. So whether it's, you know, the most obvious one is when we've included more women in decision-making processes, productivity and all kind of economic benefits are actually better. And it's like when we've, you know, when we take homeless people off the streets, crime goes down, or when, and that's a really big generalization I just made, but actually stopping this segregation of these two concepts. They're one and the same. A stronger society and community is a stronger economy.
Yeah. And Helen, you can have the last word.
Gosh, that would have been the perfect last word.
No, it would have been.
Beautifully put, and it is so true. And I think we need to keep that sense of like our individual and community well-being, and the humanity within our communities just cannot be, it's not a sideline to fiscal policy, and it's not a sideline to social policy and to, you know, governance. It's like that is actually at the core first, and the stuff works around that. Our systems should be working around that. We've got a while to go, I think, from an individual point of view, in terms of sustaining and not slipping back. I think just kind of keeping that values alignment. If what we do in our daily life is sort of aligned with the values of who we are and how we want to be in the world, and therefore how we treat others, and I think that first and foremost, I think the idea of keeping connection, and whether that connection is with your neighbour, or, you know, your workplace, or your broader community groups, or informal groups, then I think that's really important. So I think we continue to kind of align ourselves and our values with things that reinforce that mutually and positively reinforce that, and we keep connection with others. And I think those two are sort of tools to help. They're not going to drive at the structural change, but the more we're all doing that, there's a momentum that builds from that.
Wonderful. That's good too. That's perfect ending. So before we close for today, I did want to do a special shout out. Evidently, one of our audience members is organising a donation of non-perishable food items for the Mama Penny Food Pantry at Addison Road Community Centre. So if you want to do that, get in contact with Addison Road Community Centre. So there's obviously people online who are doing similar initiatives across the space. So thank you everybody again for joining us today. I must admit, I had a wonderful time. I feel very positive. I think onwards and upwards, it's all going to become much better now. And but I do think what we all just said at the end there, it's about harnessing what has actually been both a terrifying but also very positive experience around the actual power of people to deliver change in their communities and therefore in the world as well. So thanks very much for joining us, and hopefully see you soon. And thanks again to all our panelists. You were absolutely wonderful. Cheers.